One. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kim Havens. I am the event manager here at An Unlikely Story. We are so happy. We have customers in the store. It's kind of fantastic. So honored to welcome you tonight for an event with David Mitchell. I do have a couple housekeeping items to go over. If you lose your sound or your video, just go ahead and refresh your browser and it'll pop right back on. We highly encourage you to ask questions. There is an ask a question box. And then if there are questions that you like, you can upvote them and the most popular ones will float to the top. And there is a buy button where I highly recommend you buy your very own copy of Utopia Avenue, buy a second one to give to your friend like I did, because then we all had to talk about it. David Mitchell is the award-winning and best-selling author of The Thousand Autumns of Jacob Dezote. I'm saying that wrong, but David will correct us. Black Swan Green, Cloud Atlas, Number 9 Dream, Zoot, Ghost Written, and The Bone Clocks. Twice shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, Mitchell was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2007, and in 2018, he won the Sunday Times Award for Literary Excellence. With K.A. Yoshida, Mitchell co-translated from the Japanese the international best-selling memoir, The Reason I Jump, and also if you haven't read that, you need to put that on your to-read list. David is joining us from Ireland, where he lives with his wife and his 2 children. Also joining us this evening is moderator Carolyn Kellogg. She's the former books editor of the Los Angeles Times, a writer and critic now based in the Hudson Valley. She served as a judge for the National Book Award in Nonfiction in 2019. Her work has been published widely, including the New York Times, Virginia Quarterly Review, and the Boston Globe. Or, as David puts it, Carolyn eats, breathes, and lives books, which means she's my tribe. Picking up and opening a novel by David Mitchell is agreeing that you will be suspending all non-crucial aspects of your life and surrendering yourself to his magical storytelling. Bone Clocks has over 600 pages and features 6 worlds, yet I can still vividly picture in my mind the end scene with Holly and Ireland. In Utopia Avenue, he turns his unique eye on the dark end of the 1960s with the story of music, dreams, drugs and madness, love and grief, stardom's wobbly ladder, and fame's Faustin pact. You can easily imagine yourself a groupie following this 1960s rock band on their sex and drug-filled rise to fame in 1968. Join them at Hollywood parties with cameos from Janis Joplin, Jerry Garcia, and members of the Rolling Stones. We're going to have some unlikely fun tonight as David and Carolyn are going to go behind the music, unpacking how Utopia Avenue relates to his other books in the Mitchellverse, and unpacking the musical cameos featured against this rock and roll backdrop. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that this is David's best novel yet. I could go on and on gushing and fangirling, but I will now turn the event over to Carolyn Kellogg and a warm welcome to David Mitchell. So here is David. Hello, and Carolyn. Welcome.
Oh, hello, Kim. And
Hey.
thank you, Likely Story, for having us. This is wonderful. Nice to see you, Carolyn. You're doing well.
Thank you, David. It's so great to talk to you about this book. Let's start with entering the pantheon of rock novels. Why did you want to do it? I know you could do anything, but why the rock novel?
I've been wanting to for years, and just thinking one day I really want to do a music novel, a rock novel specifically. Just thinking that over the years, it sort of makes the little grit in the oyster it makes it grow and grow, and every time you think it, it's like it becomes more real, even though you haven't started it yet. So I suppose I'm answering how rather than why. How is incrementally over years and years. Why? Because I liked its flavor of impossibility. It's impossible, because it's about music, right? And music is one opposite of a novel. There are straightforward opposites, hot, cold, day, night, etc. But I like nuanced, complex opposites. What's the opposite of music? There isn't one. There's sort of there's a nebula of opposites for something as magical and abstract and many-thinged as music. One opposite of music that interests me is novel. That's one opposite of music. Music works through molecules vibrating in the air from the source up inside your ear canal that gets interpreted as messages, and it goes into your brain. It's a physical thing. A novel, on the other hand, exists in a very different form. It's art. It can move you. It can have an emotional wallop as well. Both of those art forms can, but it exists as ink squiggles on a page, or pixels on an e-reader. It comes in through the eyeball, not through the ear. It isn't a physical thing in the same way. It's made of atoms, but the narrative isn't. It's something more neuro. So how and a novel hasn't got speakers. It's a very different beast. So to write about music and the using my kind of home art form, my only art form, maybe my home, now I think about it, the novel, that seemed like a really intriguing impossibility for me. And I really wanted to get, and I like impossible things. The other reason it's impossible is the rock novel is a cliche. They are all variations on one theme. And if they're not, it's not really a rock novel. The theme is rags to riches, a group of young people, usually, and this is drawn from both fiction and from memoir and biography. They, in the context of the 60s, would usually get together at school, know each other from school, go to art college, form a band, as Kim said in the intro, climb fame's wobbly ladder for a bit, success, a failure, success, a failure. Usually then there'd be a substance abuse problem. The two alpha males in the band would start to go head to head. The fame would get to them. The fame would start to go. The reason they shot up, they were surfing the zeitgeist, just a wave of the zeitgeist, but that wave would break, but then they aren't allowed to change. They aren't allowed to become a different band because then they lose the core fans, etc., and then either rapid decline or as many Wikipedia pages can testify, a kind of long, slow decline. Then you lose your record deal and your record label don't want you anymore, and you spend your rest of your life handling that or failing to handle it. That is the rock story, the parabola. And I liked the idea of working in a sub genre of the novel that's actually really fixed, and seeing how I can subvert that and do things differently, and not having them known each other from childhood, and actually not having a manager who completely rips them off, and not having a heroin addiction thing in the band that breaks them, not having two alpha males. I mean, they're all kind of reasonable people on the whole. They're all kind of get on with each other more than they do. Not having that exact arc. No spoilers, of course, but something happens towards the end of the book, at the end of the book, which means that the future of the band is A, truncated, and B, will not actually follow the stereotype. And I've been talking for about 8 minutes here. I should let you get a word in edgeways. That was sorry, but I just went over the hills and far away with it. Back to you.
Well, you answered my next 3 questions, so I think we're in good shape. Well, so I'm curious about like working against that arc, and it like no spoilers. It's called Utopia Avenue, and you've given us like the 60s and a better version of itself. Like it's slightly less misogynist. There's like a woman gets to be in the band, and she's not just an ornament. Like their manager doesn't rip them off. Nobody like gets hooked on heroin in the middle of. Nobody becomes a terrible junkie in the middle. Yeah. I mean, their manager is named Franklin. I mean, most managers are named like, you know, Mr. Ripoff guy.
Yeah, yeah.
He's going to be good. And so in those ways, in the characterization, you worked against. That's one of the ways that you worked against the arc. One of the other ones is that it includes all of this Mitchellverse stuff that some people who weren't paying attention were surprised by when it came at the end. It came towards the end, and I think we said that we could talk about some of
sure.
the other involvement. But I had just read Jacob de Zoet, and so I think I'm saying that right?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So I just read Jacob de Zoet right before I got Utopia Avenue. So when I got to page like 125, I was like, oh, I just read this scene. Like I knew exactly what was happening.
Oh, thank you. What was that the scene with the dream?
Yeah.
Cool. No, I was smiling not because you got the Zoot name wrong, and that's how I say it as well. I was just smiling because because I'm happy to hear you say that, and I get a slight smile of envy because I can't do that. I wrote the books, so I can't actually forget I wrote them and read them like a reader can. I'm not saying I envy you because clearly this must be the most sublime experience of your reading life, but just because I can't do it, and a part of me wishes I could, unless I sort of engineer a bizarre amnesia accident that makes me actually forget everything and forget I was ever a novelist, then I could do it. But failing that
on the page.
Failing that I can't actually do what every single reader can do. Anyway, that's not about me. I want to get the story. So I should say, firstly, in response to what you said initially, the misogyny, the bigotries of the age and the predatory nature of the music business, it is there. It's sort of, it's not within the immediate family of the band. I suppose that's another thing about rock novels. They're all about a dysfunctional family that stay together for as long as the band is working, and then when it doesn't, it starts to crack up. Everything that's wrong with the 60s, kind of, especially towards the end, it creeps in. But actually, the family space of the band, although there were issues they need to resolve early on, that stays fairly harmonious. However, I then wanted to say, I wanted to get the book up and running on its own steam before I brought in the I blush Mitchellverse. So that was why it's 125 before you realise that I'm going to do this. One day I'm going to write a book that has an almost invisible link, just one, to the Mitchellverse, which is almost an outlier. But it did not turn out to be Utopia Avenue. I'm rambling again. Help.
One of the things that I did when I was reading it the first time was I made a list of all of the characters, and because I was gonna like go through all your other books and then find them, and I realized then I am not quite that masochistic. But do you have like a master? Like I imagine you were gonna tell us about your workplace where you write. That's where you are now, right?
I've got 2 workplaces. This is the back bedroom where the heating is nice in winter and where the Wi-Fi connection's good. I've actually got a hut at the end of the garden where but I don't have any Wi-Fi, so it's perfect actually.
And are the walls covered with like long pieces of red thread and pasteboards and?
Here's a bit of a confession. Lots of people ask me that. Lots of people want it to be true, and it's sometimes tempting to say, "Oh yes, it's like that notice board they have in shows like The Wire or CSI, where it's sort of." But I actually rely on online resources about me. That's how I actually do it. I'm too lazy to do it myself. But there's a really good sort of subset of Wikipedia that's about my books, and I kind of go there to find out. So Marinus is this again, and which order are they in? Because it's in my notebooks, but from about 8 years ago, and it would take me half the day to track it down now. I just look online when I want to find out how old someone's like to be at this age, or whether I can import someone from then I know then I can go back to the original books. But my first port of call is the very kind people who are geeky about this and compile databases online. I'm a customer. I use it as well.
They're going to be so delighted to hear that if they haven't heard it before.
Really grateful, whoever you are. Thank you, because I'd be lost without you.
So how important is it to you when you bring somebody in, like Elf's girlfriend? Forgetting. How important is it for you to have everything match up, and have the dates match up, and have the personalities match up? Or do these things evolve?
It matters that I get it right. If I don't at least try to get it right, it's not really good enough, is it? So I have to match dates up. Louisa Ray, with her. I had a bit of retro explaining to do. I mean, she talks about her boyfriend in Cloud Atlas who she's just dumped. Here she is with Elf. Fair enough, got to sort that out. But we're in an open-minded age. That's okay. I think she's I don't discuss her age in Cloud Atlas. I think I imply it in Utopia Avenue because she's sort of a very young postgrad or even an older undergrad in Utopia Avenue. I think I am. I say something like it's hard to guess her age. If it won't quite match up, I give myself a bit of wiggle room. So potentially it could. That's the same attitude with the hundreds of inquiries I'll get from my proofreaders about, hang on, in this book it's this, and in that book it's that. If I can plausibly argue in the court of literary plausibility that it might work, that it might match up, that this could happen, then that's enough. I think you can be so slavishly rigid about matchups that it can end up impairing the project, which of course isn't the point when it's supposed to be an asset for it. So another long question, another long answer to a very short question. Carolyn, are we doing okay?
We're doing great. I want to ask you about David Bowie, but I want to ask you something. I want to ask you something first before we talk about the real rock stars.
Yay!
And in a lot of ways, this is like a love letter or a tribute to creative collaboration. And I wonder if that comes from like work, like that writing is so solid. Does it come from absence or did it come from presence?
Whoa, that's a very Zen question, Carolyn. I'll get Zen back at you. What do you mean by it? You said, does it come from absence or does it come from presence? Can I be laser focused on it?
the sort of love letter to creative collaboration, because I know
I see what you mean, because I'm a novelist, I don't collaborate.
along the way, I think you worked on a bunch of things. I think at least one thing you absolutely probably can't talk about, but maybe like you worked on a TV show with some people, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm able to say I worked on Matrix, but I can't say a thing about it because otherwise the entertainment lawyers will come and get me from Warner Brothers and take away my roof. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they'll shoot you with a drone, like right this second.
I'm sort of happy to talk about my screenwriting work, and now I understand your question. Yeah, it is indeed a love letter to artistic collaboration, and that's another thing about rock novels and ensemble artist novels. They're also by default about this odd thing, collaboration, when more than one of you make something. It's not odd at all. It's not. It's the way everything goes. But for a novelist, it's odd. One novel, one novelist, and only very, very occasionally is that rule broken. So, as a novelist, you never have any colleagues. You have colleagues, the publishers, of course, and you also have the pleasure of meeting journalists like yourself and booksellers like Kim, and the people I work with, but not actually when I'm doing my writing work. That's all me and only me. And it is, as long as the chemistry is right, it is a real joy to work with other people after years and years and years of having to make everything up yourself. With Lana Wachowski and Alexander Haymon, I can kind of throw a half-baked idea into our little group that for some reason we call ourselves the Pit. I can throw a half-baked idea into the Pit, and if the chemistry is right, and it must be, they take my half-baked idea and they look at the things about it that are baked, and they look at the things about it that are unbaked. They look at its potential value, and we talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and it might mutate, it might evolve, it might not, it might have the kernel of a good idea and it just needs a little bit of help. It might be a little baby idea in its incubator, but by the time they're finished, the Pit serves it up and it's baked, and I didn't have to do it all, and that's so nice. And you can see that even if you did do it all yourself, it wouldn't be this idea because it's got other people's minds. It's this aspect of a band that really interests me. Why were the Beatles so amazing when they were working together, and why were they at best kind of okay, maybe even good now and then when they were on their own, but there's no comparison, is there? How come? What's going on with that? Why is the whole greater than the sum of the parts? The book is one of my answers, really. They're 4 young people, 3 of them are songwriters. They live in this world, they breathe it. It's very different enough from writing for it to be fresh and for me to be able to sort of have to and be able to look at it like a sort of alien anthropologist visiting that tribe. But it's also close enough to writing for me, I hope, to be able to guess and find some commonalities. The last thought I have every single night I've gone to bed for the last 20 years has been, what am I working on? Something about a scene I need to get done, something about this scene, something about that character. It's the last thought I have as my brain shuts down every night, and it's the first thought I have in the morning. I'm going to guess it's like that for songwriters, just when they're in a songwriting run. So I tried to sort of draw on suspected commonalities, and I interviewed and obviously read a lot of songwriters talking about the process, and tried to make the 5th Uber character in the band 6 if we include the manager. It is the band itself. It's Utopia Avenue. Utopia Avenue is about this weird superorganism called Utopia Avenue. Just as it wasn't it wasn't David Gilmour, Sid Barrett, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, Richard Wright, who made those remarkable recordings when they were so young, and at the end of the 60s, it's the early 70s. It was Pink Floyd that made them. It was an organism that they were organs of, and that really interested me. So I just wanted to spend a book, a few hundred pages, making a portrait of a band, as I made portraits of the people in the band.
And it's very intimate. Like, you've also, one of the characters talks about seeing the idea of scenism. Is it scenism?
Scenius.
Scenius. And we can look back now and see that in terms of music and fashion and approach to the world, that the late 60s in London really was like a scenius moment. And but this is much more intimate. They're situated there, but their creative stuff is all very internal.
Yeah, they are that. I guess songwriting exists on the spectrum of raw, naked intimacy. Say, since it's been in the media, because it's 50 years old this week, Joni Mitchell's Blue. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, where you don't feel the songwriter is exposing anything about themselves at all. Maybe it's not a spectrum, or maybe it's a sort of a cube. There's also Blonde on Blonde era Bob Dylan, where it kind of feels intimate, but actually when you look at the lyrics, they defy comprehension. They're kind of both at the same time, which is his particular thing. It's sort of like, if you, it feels like an MRI scan of himself, but actually when you look at the lyrics, like, what do you actually mean? He does both. However, that's a digression. Of course, the late 60s, kind of super quick, but the late 60s, part starting off from Dylan, was the era of the birth of the singer-songwriter who would write about innermost feelings and experiences, and that was a part of the joy when to listen to their work. Nick Drake would be another from the UK. It's as if you're plugging yourself into their nervous system. And stop me if I'm wrong, but that hadn't quite been done before. That was one of the inventions of the album era, and it's still with us. Of course, it's branched and bifurcated and layered, but Billie Eilish does that too. Many singers do that too, but before the late 60s, arguably, it didn't really happen. Anyway, I interrupted you about 2 minutes ago.
I'm trying not to get distracted by talking about like technology and microphones. So let's talk about the real rock stars that appear, like Sid Barrett and David Bowie, and Nick Drake doesn't. You said that Jasper is sort of a Nick Drake-ish character.
I managed to, I couldn't quite get the chronology matching up with Nick Drake, but I did manage to infer that I think after the last session, it would just be about plausible. The last session at the grungy little recording studio in Denmark Street, kind of London's Tin Pan Alley. There's a kid called Nick Duck, or someone who's about to, they get the name wrong, and he's about to come in and do a session. But I did just manage to get him in. I should also say that Scenius word is a portmanteau word invented by Brian Eno, and again, I was a bit too. He was a bit too young to get into the book. He would have been floating around before Voxy Music really happened. But I was in touch with him, and he gave me permission to use the word. But it should be that I'm not smart enough to think of portmanteau words like scene plus genius to make the scenius. Anyway, real life musicians.
It was delightful to stumble across them. Did you always think that you were going to do that? Did you watch a bunch of documentaries? Did you, was it something that sort of evolved as you were working on the book?
Sure. Actually, that brings me back to an earlier question. Why did I write the book? I love music documentaries. I've spent hours, probably hundreds of hours of my life. YouTube is the human race, pretty much in 2D digital form. It's got the best of us and the worst of us there. All things we do, all things we shouldn't do, all things we want to do. The angels and the devils of humanity. YouTube is where they live. And one of the angels are the old documentaries there, including the music documentaries, and just not even documentaries, but little clips of Syd Barrett being interviewed, and it was recorded by chance in Amsterdam in 1968 with Roger Waters, and it was never intended to be a documentary. It was never intended to last, but somehow a copy of it was saved in a vault somewhere. And once pre-YouTube, I would never have been able to see it, but now, oh great, it's on there, and it's got 3 million hits or so. So I sort of needed to legitimize all these hours and hours and hours and hours of my life I was spending on, I know, I'll write a book, and that'll mean it's research and it's not time wasting. So that was a part of my motivation as well. Yeah, the real life people were going to be in it. They sort of have to hit a Goldilocks sweet spot. They couldn't be so much in it that the novel becomes about them. There could be so much in it that I make up major scenes in their life that didn't happen in reality, that aren't in their autobiographies or biographies or memoirs or books about them. Then I'm into alternative history territory, and I don't overtly be that. Covertly is okay, but not overtly. They mustn't be so, but then to either have them absent or just insignificant references, that would sort of offend the need for mimesis. It would be odd if they weren't there. The scene wasn't that big. They did know each other. They were sharing recording studios and record labels and drug dealers and lovers. And so it would have been odd if they hadn't been there. The rule is, I suppose, they are allowed to change the direction of a scene, but they're not allowed to change the direction of the novel. And that was a sweet spot. It was, of course, great fun researching it, and maybe catching them at moments of their life when, even though many of them had long careers, not the ones who kind of were in the infamous 27 Club or 26 Club and died, but 7, thank you. However, most of them, and it's still true, are famous for a particular era, for a particular segment of their career, and that's what even now the stock photos are of. So it was fun to choose times in their life. Often the chronology chose it for me, but David Bowie, for example, it's pre-Ziggy Stardust. It's even pre Space Oddity. When he was
Laughing gnome, right?
You know your stuff, of course. You know your stuff. Yeah, yeah. Well, awful. Yeah, I mean, kind of is, but you can also kind of see. You can see the beginnings of the later him as well. It is awful, but it's Bowie awful, and and that means it's not exactly awful. It's something else. He was an artist. He was finding his way. He didn't spring fully formed from the brow of Zeus. Actually, they never do. No one does. That's a myth. And we're seeing him as he's paying his dues and putting in his 10,000 hours learning to be any good. So it was fun. Yeah, it was fun to sort of find the less than obvious moments in the artist's life to draw the cameos from.
So this book has clear and obvious integrations between Cloud Atlas, Number 9 Dream, Bone Clocks, I think Black Swan Dream, but I'm not sure where.
There's probably the Moon Grey Cat somewhere.
And I'm sure that there's Ghost Written as well.
Yeah, the Mongolian, yeah.
So in that way, it becomes part of the Mitchellverse, and everybody who's in this book becomes part of the Mitchellverse, and that means that like Syd Barrett can resurface in the Mitchellverse.
Oh, I hadn't thought of. Wow!
You've moved them all onto your planet.
If we were Greek, I'd be really worried by now, because you're kind of assigning me power over the god of death here. I can kind of actually resurrect people, which, as we all know from myths, legends, that is not a healthy thing to be going around bragging about. But I suppose you're kind of right. That's art for you, isn't it? Maybe art does have not individual artists. I'm as mortal as the next person. But art itself has got kind of a power over mortality. It can bring people back, only in a way, maybe only an echo and a reflection and a mirror. But that's actually worth something. Maybe in a strange form, maybe in a strange sort of way. That's what art is. It's a temporary kind of a triumph over mortality. We're getting really deep, aren't we? But my mum's a flower artist. My mum was a watercolorist. Is still. She's gone back in. Thanks to lockdown. She's well. I'm a son, and I'm proud of her, and I'd say this anyway. But she's an exquisitely gifted watercolorist who specialised in flowers when she was working. And I'd see her. One of my earliest memories after my brother and I were born. She started working from home, be in the studio, the doors would always be open, Radio 4, like your NPR on the radio, and she'd be bent over a flower, or she'd be bent over a drawing board, big mounted board with a vase of flowers in front of her, and I'd be playing, be coming in and out with my brother, and over the course of the afternoon I'd just have a look and what mum was up to that day, and these I think exquisite watercolors of flowers would appear, and then the flowers in the vase would fade and go, and they'd last a day or two, but the painting would go nowhere. The painting was there permanently. I've still got some. They're here, from flowers that turned into compost and probably turned into other flowers. How old am I? 52. 45 years ago, those flowers haven't existed, but art makes them still exist. Maybe that's one reason we do it. There's other reasons, but maybe that's one. And it's the same. The same is true for the music. Most of the people in the book are dead. In fact, all of the cameos are, because it makes things much more straightforward from a legal point of view. It was awful, but it took about 4 years to write the book, and a few major names sort of toppled off the perch as I was writing it. And as a fan and as a human being, I was thinking, oh, that's that's awful that Bowie's gone now. But then as a writer, I was thinking, it's terrible. But the music's still there. The music's still something that's alive for us. Those long those notes from those long since cremated or buried vocal cords are as fresh as the day they were recorded. They're still there. If that's not a kind of a triumph of life and art over the Grim Reaper, then what is? Am I sounding like a complete fool, Carolyn? I'm a bit worried, sorry.
Delightful. There's a lot of times in the book, people talk about what art is and what art making means, and just these kind of ideas that you're talking about. And one of the things that I found really awesome was that critics are always wrong. One even gets beamed over the head with a guitar.
You've got to let artists or writers or anyone. You just have to let them have their moment of wish fulfillment. There are wonderful critics in the world, and well, I think I can say you and the best of your tribe are a really crucial part of the ecosystem. You are. No, you are your matchmakers. You keep your egos out of it, and you generally understand that space is at such a premium that why waste it on a hatchet job? Why kick something? If you don't like it, don't review it. Like just kind of and on the whole, as far as I can see, that's a precept you've followed through the whole of your career. So when I indulge in my wish fulfillments against reviews and critics, it's certainly not of your ilk. Let me make that really clear. But occasionally you meet, I think, less high-minded reviewers who just think, well, the power goes to their heads a little bit, I think, is the most charitable way to say it, and they promote themselves at the expense of someone else's work, which I think is a pretty shoddy thing to do. But hey, that's just me. And maybe there's a valid role as well. But if any young people are watching this, be a critic like the person on the screen here. Don't be a critic who might make you chortle when you read the hatchet jobs. But why? You're young, you're smart, you've got energy. Don't spend it on hatchet jobs. Spend it on something more worthwhile than that, is what I want to say. Over, sorry.
So there's one thing that before, I know Kim has a question for us coming up, but I realized in rereading Utopia Avenue, after having watched the documentary of The Reason I Jump, and I read the book when it came out, but I hadn't seen it, and there's a grid in Utopia Avenue that I know his name is not Formaggio. I want to call him Formaggio, but it's Formaggio.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same root. It's Italian for cheese.
Cheese. So when Jasper is in school and he feels like he's being sort of possessed by this knock character, he uses his roommate uses this chart to communicate with Knock, and it looks like the charts that the autistic people use in The Reason I Jump. Is there a connection?
Yes, it is. don't think I sort of saw the alphabet board and then thought, oh, I'll put that in a novel. It's just, it was around. We got one for our son. We're sort of in the process of helping him to learn how to use it to communicate with us as well. So it's we've actually got a few lying around the house. And Formaggio's smart, and he kind of realised that this is a way to speak with this entity who can't speak. It is odd. This is a recurring theme in my work. Even before our son was born, I was writing about not being able to express yourself as fully as you can on the inside. It's kind of a thing. It's sort of an archetypal theme in my life. It's there because of my speech disfluency, my stammer, which was much more pronounced as a kid. I yet to come to a working accommodation with it, and was still kind of at war with it, which wasn't a healthy state of affairs. So the language inside my head was much richer than the language I could produce through my speech systems. Then again, something happened when I was in Japan. I didn't have more than 200-300 words when I went out there. So again, the language I could say so much more in my head than I could articulate. And then, as it happens, our son is non-verbal autistic, and we get the evidence of the richness of his inner world through words he writes, from his fine-tuned nature of his comprehension when we speak to him. But he probably never will be able to do what we're doing now, this sort of cut and thrust ping pong of conversation. So he lives in that, but I sort of am an hourly active observer of it, and so it's not surprising that it's sort of it's also an archetypal theme in my work, because it's an archetypal theme in my life as well. Does that make sense?
Are you there?
Oh, yeah.
We both froze. I know we're almost out of time, and Kim was had a question for us, I think. Are you there,
Sure.
Kim?
Yes, except I'm not Zoom. We are not going to cut you off.
Hey.
We can keep talking. So I love this question from Christopher. He says, why create a Mitchellverse with your novels? How did it come about? And what do you think it adds to your work? And I know as a fan how delighted we are to find, it's like finding an old friend. But how did it come about?
It evolved, Kim. And Chris, was it who asked the question?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Christopher.
Thank you, Christopher. It evolved. I did it first just because I liked it when Haruki Murakami did it. I liked it when Shakespeare does it. He's got Falstaff in history plays, and then he brings him back to this sort of saucy romp, The Merry Wives of Windsor, allegedly at the Queen's request. It's a difference between a dinner with an old friend and a speed date. The character's got history, and I like that buzz of recognition. That's reason one. Reason two, that's reason two as well, really. They bring luggage with them. If you've read them in a previous book, then they bring associations, they bring mood, they bring history. Now, the prime directive is that the novel has to work. They all have to work independently. I'm not writing a series. It's something else. But as it happens, if you have read the character in a different book, then its impact will be a little bit different, but and maybe richer. But it has to be fully self-standing, even if you've never read a thing I've written before, and after this book, we'll certainly never be reading anything again. The book still has to work. Then I realised it lets me fulfill two ambitions at once. First ambition, as a kid, dreaming about being a novelist one day. I wanted to be like Tolkien. I wanted to be like Ursula Le Guin. I wanted to be like Isaac Asimov and write these huge, great cathedral, operatic, symphonic, mega things, this biggest possible canvas. However, I'm also kind of quite interested about, quite nerdy about very specific, contained microcosms as well. And the Mitchellverse, and so grandiose to call it that. It's okay if someone else calls it, but if I call it, I turn into one of those people who refer to themselves in the third person, which is just unforgivable. So the Uber book. I used to be able to say that before Uber was a thing, but now it makes me think of cars. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The universe. It lets me do it lets me do both those things. It lets me write on a macro scale as well as a micro scale, and that's really nice. But finally, as well, it's assembling something. It's giving me lots and lots of pieces and characters whose fates are unresolved, but they'll have grudges. Character at the end of the Blade House. Hugo Lamb from the Bone Clocks and Prince Queen came of him. In my mind, they're still out there somewhere, and they aren't going to forget what was done to them. They want justice. So what I'm trying to say is, it's lining me up for this kind of almost free Avengers Assemble kind of novel, where I bring them all in and throw them at each other. Thanks, Christopher.
Excellent. And Tran has a question. Did you listen to music while writing Utopia Avenue or writing in general?
Yes, I do. You can't really get started without music. It has to be not in English or any language I have any knowledge of, or it has to be instrumental, and not so busy that it gets between me and the screen or me and the page, but busy enough to sort of quietly drip feed stimulation. And it can depend on the stage I am at writing as well. A friend, Michel Faber, who kind of talked about listening to conceptual music when he's at the conceptual stage, narrative music when he's at the narrative stage, conversational music when he's writing dialogue. I kind of like that. If I'm really honest, it's not quite that clear cut for me. It's sort of, it's a particular joy, isn't it? We don't talk about it much, but how do you know what you want to listen to? Kind of, why is it that in the old days you get this LP out, or in more recent days you get this CD out, not another from your collection of many, or you stream this playlist and not that playlist? How come? How can you just sort of know? I think of it as the same way as I know how to brew which tea I'm going to put in my pot that day. I've got a nice big teapot. It'll last me the day, and I come down in the morning and I've got 20 different types of tea, green, white, black, from around the world. I've got spicy teas. I've got oolong tea steamed in evaporated milk. But I always know what kind of tea I want that day. And I think it's the same with music. So kind of, yes, I do, but I can't say exactly how I know what kind of music I want to play, which is a question I asked. So, no music, no life, as the old slogans of Tower Records used to be. Please speak, Carolyn. I keep steaming.
Oh, I have a follow-up question for that,
Please do.
which is, did you listen to the artists that appear in the book, like when you were procrastinating on it? Like,
yeah.
say.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So, Leonard Cohen in the elevator of the Chelsea Hotel. Yes, certainly. When I was trying to bring bring the scene into being. I listened to Leonard Cohen for a day or two, for sure. Or Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash and the band go to Laurel Canyon, for sure.
I love
It's
that.
a great excuse to listen to them. Gosh, those recordings sound good. They really have beaten death. They sound great art. Not only still sounds good as decades roll by. In some cases, it can actually improve, which is an alchemy I can't get my head around at all. But some of those records, I think they sound better now than I remember them sounding when I was younger. And I will hazard a guess, and they were even when they came out. Time also is an ingredient in art, just as time will change the colour or the tone or the patina of a fresco painted on a chapel roof 400 years ago. Time also does something to music that's not mechanical. I don't really understand it, but Joni Mitchell's Blue 50 years after it was released, and Joni Mitchell's Blue on the morning it came out, but somehow not quite the same thing. I think. Anyway, I don't have to depend that on live TV because I don't think I could. We can move on.
Okay, I love this question. This question is from JW. He says, "Hi, David. I've read all your books and loved each of them. Yes, me too. Cloud Atlas was my gateway drug into reading, and for that, you have my lifelong gratitude."
Oh, I'm honored.
He says, "Apologies if this is too personal a question, but which of your books do you feel taught you the most about yourself while you were writing it?"
Oh, wow, that's great.
I love that question.
Yeah, I've never been asked it. Which of my books taught me the most? I've got a nasty habit of skipping ahead to the end of the question and imagining what it's going to be. And I thought it was, with apologies, I thought it was going to be more prosaic, like which do you like most, but which taught me the most, not necessarily, not the same thing at all. First answer then, they all do. They all teach me something. How do I quantify the some things and say, it'll teach me something about writing. That's certainly true. I suppose the earlier books taught me most about writing because I still had the most to learn, but I still have a lot to learn, good heavens, now more than ever. So I'm not even sure if that's true. About myself as opposed to writing, however, even though those two are sort of pretty much intertwined, me and writing, but I know what you mean about myself. I'm tempted to say Black Swan Green because I feel that's where I sort of, and Jason's probably more like me than any of my other characters, even though there's a quantity of me in everybody. I think there's a quantity of any character that any author, any writer ever writes in that writer. Where else have they come from? But Jason, I slightly wrote my first book fourth. It's my fourth book, and it reads like, well, it was actually sort of reassembled from notes I had before I wrote the first manuscript I managed to complete, which was in turn the manuscript before I wrote Ghostland. So it's going way, 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 way back into the vaults. And I just put it away for a few years, and then after Cloud Atlas thought, well, I don't want to write another Cloud Atlas. I want to write something really different. What have I got? These old index cards. I wrote it out on index cards because I couldn't afford a computer back then, and I read that Nabokov wrote on index cards. So I thought if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I'm tempted to say Jason from Black Swan Green just because I thought about my relationship with language there. He stammers, as do I, and to modify your question, maybe that was most, not just what taught me the most about myself, but what transformed me more than any other. It transformed me from being someone who was ashamed of my stammer, who tried to hide it, who tried to fight it, into someone who thought, as a result of writing the book, well, once I've written this book, there'll be no more hiding it. I mean, it's somewhat. I'll qualify this before I start by saying, no, it's not really appropriate to outing oneself in an LGBTQ sense, but in an analogous, metaphorical way, it felt a little bit like that. This is something very personal, intimate about myself that I never actually discussed and put out there. But now, as a result of this book, that's exactly what I'm doing. And that was transformative. I had to kind of go on that journey with Jason to be able to write about it. And he also goes from a covert, concealed, ashamed stammerer, someone who finds strength sort of 20 years before I did in reality to say, look, this is a part of me, and if you've got a problem with it, it's your problem, and I can't alter it, but I can alter how I feel about it. And what I feel about it is, if you have a problem with me when I block, when my face goes weird, when I am clearly disfluent, then screw you, it's your problem, it's not mine. And that sort of militancy that Jason finds, it was so helpful for me. And I became, and still am, a very proud patron of Stammer, the UK disfluency advocacy group, and it made me just think more about myself, and probably would be a writer had I not stammered, but I don't think I'd be the writer I am, the writer speaking now. So a huge answer to a short question, but that's it. Thank you, JW.
Fantastic question. Thank you, JW, for asking it. I feel like we should let you go to bed or something, David. What time is it?
It's only 4 minutes past midnight. I'm not a pumpkin yet. If people are happy staying on for a couple more, then I'm really enjoying myself. And Wi-Fi's holding up as well. If you are, but I know that Carolyn might have other appointments, and you too.
Yes.
We do have the best thing happening.
It's the best thing happening. Like, I'm just like, I could just sit here all night and listen to you talk, David. It's just such a dream. I'm still just can't believe we're having this event. This is a great question from Adam. He says, you've had musicians and music enthusiasts in your prior books, but this is the first time I remember rock taking such a focus. Can you talk about how you chose to represent scenes of performance?
Oh, that's nice. I'd almost reverse the horse and the cart order there. Only by performance could I really represent rock. That was the paradox I talked in. I was referring to earlier with Carolyn's very first question, all those hours and hours ago at the beginning of. Sorry, it's going on a bit. But how do you do it? Books don't have speakers. What's going to be more stimulating? The song Hotel California, or a 5-page description of the song Hotel California? Clearly the song is. Yet, in a sense, the book is a 600-odd page description of Hotel California. What on earth do you do to make that visceral, valid, engaging experience? How do you sort of avoid the inherent turgidity of describing music in prose? And the answer is, novels don't have speakers, but they're pretty damn good at describing human emotion. They're pretty good at describing and representing causality in the real world. And when you see a character in a particular situation, the music of books is that you identify with a character if you've written him or her well, and you will feel what they feel. So, and if what they're feeling is music, if what they're feeling is emotions that comes from music, then that's how you do it. That's how you beat the paradox. And performance is where that happens. So, in a sense, the book is a compendium of acts of escapology from the bind that you put yourself in when you set out to write a book about a different art form, in this case music. School of escapology is performance scenes. So there's one in Glasgow, I think, where the band are doing the first Scottish date, and it's where the point of view of lens is with Elf, and she's just watching a member of the audience, this big, rock-hard Scottish woman, just leaning against the stage with a pint glass in her hand and just watching Elf perform. And I try to show what the music is doing by having it reflect on this audience member's face and how she responds to it, if I've done my homework correctly, is actually how the reader will respond to it. So the human face that I describe becomes the avatar for the reader's ear. And their emotional response to this fictional music from a band that doesn't actually exist. So that's what I would do with Adam's question there. The performance scenes were crucial, and they were a form of that they were an eschatological type from the bind to put themselves in. Good question, isn't it?
Wow.
Shall we let everyone leave? What do you think?
No.
One more?
I
Just one more.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to come on and say goodbye so sadly. David, this has been such an honor hosting you.
Oh.
There's certain emails I get, and as Carrie would say, I got the email and then I'll just kind of do the little happy dance like, yes!
Oh, thank you, Kim.
Oh gosh, this is just a dream. Thank you so much for joining us. And Carolyn,
I spoke too much, Carolyn. I hardly let you get a word in part 2 there. Sorry.
It's so great. We can do this again. I have so many more questions.
Yes.
Great.
Oh,
what are you doing tomorrow night?
I'll be here. Really, it's great. Well, if you've got enough questions for another event, then do speak with my people.
Thank you so much for having me, Carolyn. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, Carolyn, this has been so great. And the next time I go to the bus station, I'm going to get in touch with you. So, the worst thing about the events is that I can't give you a big hug. So consider this a big virtual hug, David. Thank you so much for being. And
it's a big group hug for everyone.
It is, yes. Big group hug, everyone.
Big head press. You have to lean into the and just press your head against the lens. I can feel 61 full health just pressing into my forehead.
Thank you
very much. Excellent.
62,
Thank you so much. And hopefully I'll get to meet you in person someday. So thank you everyone for joining us, and everyone click to buy the book. You will love it. I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.